Hello everyone. In the previous session we have seen how huge the data is growing, who are contributing to the huge amounts of data, what exactly is big data, what are the big numbers, and we also mentioned there that the traditional database systems are unable to process these huge amounts of data. Let us see in this session where exactly the traditional DBMS are failing to process the huge amounts of data. So, let us start with where exactly the huge amounts of data is unable to fit into the traditional database platforms. Big data is working with the tremendous amounts of data which is coming from various types of sources like mobile devices, digital repositories, enterprise applications and so on. This data doesn't exactly be in a structured format. It can also come in unstructured format also, and the data size is also starting from terabytes to exa and zettabytes. Now, relational database systems, as part of our curriculum we have worked with Oracle. So, let us try to talk with respect to Oracle. How come the traditional database systems are unable to store and process huge amounts of data? Because of its volume and the velocity with which the data is getting generated. These are the two major criteria where the problems are identified. So, coming to the limitations of traditional RDBMS to support this huge amounts of data or big data. The first one, the data size has increased beyond the imagination of the programmers, researchers, wherein RDBMS can maximum store up to some large objects. Beyond that, the RDBMS has limitations to store huge amounts of data. And they even tried with scaling of the systems, both horizontal and vertical scaling. Still the systems are unable to cope up with these huge amounts of data. So, volume of the data is the first problem faced by the traditional RDBMS systems. Huge amounts of data is unable to fit into the traditional database systems. Coming to the second problem, traditional RDBMS systems work with structured data, wherein the data is to fit into the format of rows and columns, if we take Oracle as the example. But coming to the big data which is getting generated by various sources, it is either structured, semi-structured or unstructured. But DBMS or the traditional RDBMS, they expect only structured data. So, we will see what exactly is structured data, what is semi-structured, what is unstructured. So, the second problem faced by RDBMS systems to process the big data is the type of the data, wherein the RDBMS is expecting structured data, but the data that is getting generated is either structured, semi-structured or unstructured. And the third problem, RDBMS works with limited speeds, or RDBMS engines have limited speed capacities, but the big data is getting generated with huge velocities, or we say the data is getting generated very frequently. The frequency of data generation is very high. RDBMS cannot process data with that speeds. This is the third limitation. So, if we summarize, there are three major limitations the traditional RDBMS systems are facing to deal with big data. First one being the huge amounts of size of the data which is unable to fit into the traditional RDBMS. Second one, the type of the data wherein structured, semi-structured, unstructured data is getting generated which is not fitting into the structured framework of the RDBMS systems. Third one, the speed at which the data is getting generated, the RDBMS engines are not matching the velocities of data generation. So, these are the three major problems faced by the traditional RDBMS systems to process or to store these huge amounts of data. Now, what are the key features of big data? There are so many V's, coming to big data, but majorly there are 5 key V's, we call them as V's. So let us talk about the 5 V's of big data. The first V we will be addressing is volume of the data. As I kept on talking, big data means huge amounts of data which is getting generated, maybe starting from terabytes, petabytes and so on. So data is in huge volumes. So the first V is volume of the data. Second one, velocity, how fast the data is getting generated. The statistics are showing per minute the data that is getting generated via various platforms is huge. So we are talking not in per day measures, we are talking per minute measures of velocity. So the second V of big data is velocity. Let us talk about the third V, which is variety. So under variety of data, various types of data is getting generated. Say for example, somebody has posted a pic or a post on social media networks. How do we respond? We might respond with a text message, we might respond with an emoji, or you might respond with a GIF, or you might respond with a video, you might respond with an audio. For the same post, you are observing various types of responses. So we say a variety of data is getting generated. If I just take one example of social media post, I talked about this one. When you talk about the other things also, so many options are there to respond. So when you are trying to talk about what is the exact data type of something, you cannot talk. So there are various types of data that is getting generated. Then value of the data. What is value of the data? Value doesn't mean a monetary value. You talk about how much the data is contributing to the decision making process of an organization, or how much insight it is providing for the managerial process. That is spoken about the value of big data. So how many V's? Volume, which talks about size of the data; velocity, how fast or frequent the data is getting generated; how many types of data or varieties of data that is getting generated, and what value is it contributing to the organization. The final V among these 5 V's is veracity. Veracity talks about how much noise is included in the data that is getting generated, or is it coming from authorized sources or not, or also what is the relevance of the data that is coming into an organization or into a device. Say for example, somebody is sending a WhatsApp message to you. Is it relevant to you, or somebody has sent you a spam message? So you are talking about veracity, relevance of the message that is coming into a device or an organization. Now to summarize, these are the 5 key features of big data, which in short we call them as 5 V's: volume, velocity, variety, value and veracity. We have already seen who are contributing to the evolution of big data. These are some of the sources. Sensors, when you talk about IoT, when one device is talking to the other device; social media interactions; business transactions; the electronic files which we attach through mails or any other media; and broadcastings. All these are the major sources of big data. Now, when I was talking about traditional RDBMS are failing, I mentioned structured, semi-structured and unstructured data. Let us talk about the types of data. First one, these are majorly types of big data. First one, structured data, wherein any data which can be stored or accessed or processed in a specific form or in a fixed format, we call it as structured data. Say for example, the marks transcript has a specific format. Your hall ticket has a specific format. So that comes into a specific format. Any data which fits into a specific format while storing, while accessing, while processing, we call it as structured data. Unstructured data, almost contrary to structured data, anything which doesn't fit into a specific format during storing, accessing and processing, we call it as unstructured data. Semi-structured, which comes in between, it's a mediocre format. So there are three types of data: structured, unstructured, semi-structured. Let us see some examples for structured data: normal Excel files or SQL databases which fit into the tabular format, rows and columns. Whenever I want to store my data in SQL, I need to define a table, I need to fit in my data, insert data into the table. For accessing, I might use rest of the commands, DML commands and all, or select statement. So various statements are there which can deal with storing the data, accessing the data and trying to fit the data into this tabular format, structured data. Unstructured data, which is coming from most of the social networking websites. As I told, if someone posts something on their social networking site, how do we respond? Everybody will not respond in the same manner. Each one will respond with various types of responses. So you cannot fit the response from a user to a post into a fixed format, unstructured. So these are the examples. Semi-structured data, they do have a structure, but sometimes they might have some missing values also which exactly do not fit into this structure. So this is called as semi-structured, and these are the examples of semi-structured data. Let us have a quick comparison of these three types of data. In terms of the data is mapped, scalability, performance and how organized the data is.